Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to control someone who refuses to react? You insult them, they remain composed. You pressure them, they do not rush. You try to make them feel guilty. They listen, but they do not immediately surrender. You provoke them, hoping anger will make them careless. But instead of giving you the reaction you expected, they become quiet. And suddenly, the person trying to manipulate them has nothing to work with. There is a reason for this. Manipulation feeds on emotional reaction, fear, anger, guilt, jealousy, the desperate need to be understood, the need to prove yourself, the fear of losing someone. These emotions are not weaknesses, they are part of being human. But when another person learns how to trigger them at will, your emotions can become strings in their hands. The Stoics understood this long ago. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his life surrounded by political pressure, criticism, betrayal, ambition, and people seeking influence. Yet again and again, he returned to one principle: your mind must remain your own, because the person who controls your emotional state can often influence your decisions. But the person who cannot disturb your inner state has far less power over you. This is why calm people are so difficult to manipulate, not because they feel nothing, but because they have learned something most people never learn. Feeling an emotion and obeying an emotion are two different things, and once you understand that distinction, manipulation begins to lose its power. Imagine someone says something deliberately disrespectful. Perhaps they criticize you in front of others. Perhaps they mention something they know makes you insecure. Perhaps they question your intelligence, your character, or your ability. Why? Sometimes they genuinely disagree with you, but sometimes they are waiting for something, a reaction. They want you angry enough to argue, defensive enough to explain yourself, afraid enough to obey, guilty enough to give them what they want. And the moment you react automatically, they learn something valuable about you. They learn where the button is. If mentioning your past makes you defensive, they will mention your past. If ignoring you makes you desperate for attention, they will withdraw attention. If criticism makes you seek approval, they will criticize you and then offer approval when you behave the way they want. If anger makes you surrender simply to end the conflict, anger becomes their weapon. Manipulation often begins with observation. People watch what affects you, then some learn to use it. But calmness interrupts this process. When you stop giving predictable emotional reactions, the other person can no longer easily determine which pressure will move you. They push, nothing. They withdraw. You remain steady. They accuse. You ask yourself whether the accusation is true instead of immediately defending yourself. They become angry. You refuse to become angry merely because they are. Now something has changed. They are no longer controlling the emotional temperature of the room. You are controlling yourself. And self-control is where freedom begins. Most manipulation happens quickly. Someone pressures you. Decide now. Someone threatens you. If you really cared about me, you would do this. Someone accuses you. You always do this. Someone provokes you. So you're just going to let them disrespect you? And your emotions immediately demand action. Respond, defend yourself, explain, agree, fight back, make the discomfort disappear. But calm people have developed a powerful habit. They wait. Not because they are weak, not because they do not know what to say, but because they understand that urgency can be used against them. When emotion rises, judgment often becomes less clear. So they create distance. They might say, "I'll think about it. I don't need to answer that right now. I understand what you're saying." Or perhaps they say nothing at all. That small pause changes everything, because once you pause, you can ask, "Why am I being pressured? What does this person actually want from me? Am I making this decision because it is right, or because I want this uncomfortable feeling to disappear?" That question alone can expose manipulation. The Stoic does not ask, "How do I make this person happy?" The Stoic asks, what is the right action for me to take? There is an enormous difference. One makes your decisions dependent on another person's emotions. The other returns authority to your character. One of the easiest people to manipulate is someone desperate to prove something. Tell them they are weak, and they will do something foolish to prove they are strong. Tell them they are afraid, and they may take unnecessary risks to prove their courage. Tell them they are selfish, and they may sacrifice their boundaries to prove they are generous. Tell them they are unsuccessful, and they may spend money they do not have simply to appear successful. This is why insecurity is so easily exploited. When you desperately need other people to see you a certain way, they can influence you simply by threatening that image. But imagine telling a deeply secure person, "You're weak." They might simply think, "Perhaps you believe that," and continue with their day. Where is the leverage? There is none. You cannot easily control someone through an insult when they do not need your approval. You cannot easily manipulate someone through misunderstanding when they are comfortable being misunderstood. You cannot easily pressure someone through rejection when they are willing to walk away. This is one of the quiet powers of Stoicism. It teaches you to stop building your identity inside other people's minds. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that praise and criticism exist in the minds of others. Your character exists in your actions, so ask yourself, why should another person's opinion force you to abandon your principles? If someone calls you selfish because you said no, does that automatically make you selfish? If someone calls you arrogant because you established a boundary, does that make the boundary wrong? If someone becomes angry because you refuse to obey them, does their anger prove you are wrong? No. Examine yourself honestly, correct yourself when necessary, but never confuse another person's emotional reaction with moral truth. Manipulative people often use silence as pressure. They stop speaking to you. They become cold. They withdraw affection. They leave your message unanswered, and then they wait. Because many people cannot tolerate uncertainty, so they chase. Are you angry? Did I do something? Please talk to me. I'm sorry. Sometimes they apologize without even knowing what they did. They simply want the tension to end. And once another person realizes that silence makes you surrender, silence becomes a tool. But calm people can sit with discomfort. They do not immediately chase every person who withdraws. They do not assume every silence is an emergency. They give others space. More importantly, they give themselves space. If someone genuinely needs time, they respect it. If someone is deliberately using distance to force obedience, they refuse to reward the behavior. This can be deeply confusing to someone accustomed to controlling people through withdrawal. They expected pursuit. Instead, they received peace. They expected desperation. Instead, they received patience. They expected you to abandon yourself to restore the relationship. Instead, you remained where you were. This is not coldness, it is emotional independence. There is another reason calm people are difficult to manipulate. They observe. When you are constantly talking, defending yourself, explaining yourself, and revealing every emotion, you give people enormous amounts of information. A calm person often does the opposite. They listen. They notice patterns. They notice when someone's words and behavior contradict each other. They notice when kindness suddenly appears before a request. They notice when guilt follows a boundary. They notice when every disagreement somehow becomes their fault. They notice when another person constantly creates urgency. They notice when someone repeatedly provokes them and then criticizes their reaction. And instead of immediately confronting every pattern, sometimes they simply remember it. This is important. You do not have to expose every manipulative person. You do not have to announce, "I know what you're doing." Sometimes the wisest response is simply to stop participating, reduce access, strengthen your boundaries, stop explaining, stop reacting, and watch. Because when you remain quiet long enough, people often reveal themselves. Guilt can be one of the strongest forms of emotional pressure. You've changed. After everything I've done for you, I guess I know how little I mean to you. If you cared, you wouldn't say no. These statements are powerful because decent people do not want to hurt others. And there is nothing wrong with caring. The problem begins when compassion becomes obedience. A calm person hears the guilt without immediately surrendering to it. They ask, "Have I actually done something wrong?" If the answer is yes, they take responsibility, they apologize. They correct their behavior. But if the answer is no, they allow the other person to be disappointed. That requires strength, because many people believe boundaries should never upset anyone. But sometimes a healthy boundary will upset the person who benefited from you having none. Their disappointment does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. Their anger does not automatically create an obligation. Their sadness does not automatically require your surrender. You can care about someone's feelings without handing them control over your choices. That is maturity. Perhaps this is the greatest reason they are difficult to manipulate. Manipulation requires leverage, and one of the greatest forms of leverage is the threat of loss. I'll leave. You'll lose this opportunity. No one else will tolerate you. You need me. Fear enters, and suddenly you begin negotiating against yourself. You tolerate what you once promised you would never tolerate. You abandon boundaries. You beg. You chase. You accept disrespect because losing the person seems more frightening than losing yourself. But there comes a point in emotional maturity when you understand not everything must be kept. Some relationships should end. Some opportunities should be refused. Some arguments should be abandoned. Some people should be allowed to misunderstand you. Some doors should remain closed. The Stoic does not desperately cling to what is outside his control. People can leave. Opinions can change. Circumstances can disappear. But your character remains your responsibility. When you become genuinely willing to lose something rather than betray yourself to keep it, manipulation loses one of its greatest weapons, fear. This does not mean you become careless. You can love deeply, you can value relationships, you can fight for something meaningful, but you no longer say, "I must keep this at any cost," because sometimes the cost is your dignity. Do not misunderstand this. Being calm does not mean allowing people to mistreat you. It does not mean staying silent when action is necessary. It does not mean becoming emotionless. Stoic calmness is not weakness. It is disciplined strength. A calm person can say no. A calm person can leave. A calm person can confront someone. A calm person can defend themselves. A calm person can end a relationship. The difference is that their action comes from judgment rather than emotional chaos. They do not need to scream to establish a boundary. They do not need revenge to prove strength. They do not need the final word to know where they stand. Sometimes the strongest sentence is simply, "No." And sometimes the strongest action is leaving without turning around to see whether they finally understand. The deeper lesson is not about learning how to defeat manipulators. It is about becoming so grounded within yourself that manipulation finds fewer places to attach. Know your values. Know your weaknesses. Know what makes you angry. Know what makes you afraid. Know why rejection hurts you. Know why criticism affects you. Know why certain people can make you abandon your boundaries. Self-awareness is protection, because the parts of yourself you refuse to examine can become the very parts other people learn to control. Marcus Aurelius constantly examined his own mind, not because he hated himself, but because self-mastery requires self-knowledge. So tonight, ask yourself, what reaction in me is easiest for others to trigger? Anger? Guilt? Fear of rejection? The need for approval? The need to be right? The fear of being alone? Do not judge the answer. Study it, because awareness creates choice, and choice creates freedom. The world will always contain people who try to influence you, some through anger, some through guilt, some through praise, some through silence, some through fear. You cannot control that, but you can control whether every emotional invitation receives a response. You can learn to pause, to observe, to question, to remain quiet when someone expects an argument, to say no when someone expects guilt to change your answer, to walk away when someone expects fear to keep you trapped. And slowly, something changes. People realize they cannot easily provoke you into decisions. They cannot easily shame you into obedience. They cannot easily frighten you into surrender. They cannot easily control you by withdrawing their approval. Not because you became cold, but because you became centered. You finally understood that your peace should not depend on another person's behavior. So the next time someone tries to pull you into emotional chaos, remember, you do not have to follow them there. Let them raise their voice. You can keep yours steady. Let them misunderstand you. You can remain certain of your intentions. Let them provoke you. You can pause. Let them threaten to walk away. You can decide whether what remains is worth keeping, because the strongest person in the room is not always the loudest. Sometimes it is the person who cannot be pushed into becoming someone they are not. Stay calm, stay observant, keep possession of your own mind, because once you can govern yourself, you become very difficult for anyone else to govern, and perhaps that is one of the quietest forms of freedom. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to make people understand you. You explain why you said no. You explain why you walked away. You explain why something hurt you. You explain why you changed. You explain your intentions. And sometimes, no matter how carefully you speak, the other person continues to misunderstand you. At first, you may believe you simply haven't explained yourself well enough, so you try again. More words, more details, more justification, but eventually you may discover something uncomfortable. Some people do not misunderstand you because you explained poorly. They misunderstand you because misunderstanding you benefits them. If they can make you defend yourself, they can keep you emotionally engaged. If they can make you question yourself, they can weaken your certainty. If they can keep you explaining, they can keep the conversation centered around their judgment of you. The calm person eventually recognizes this pattern and stops. Not angrily, not dramatically. They simply realize, I have already explained myself. There is tremendous freedom in that realization. You do not need universal agreement before you are allowed to make a decision. You do not need someone's permission to establish a boundary. You do not need everyone to understand your reasons before those reasons become valid. Sometimes you simply say, this is my decision, and leave it there. The person accustomed to controlling you through endless debate may become frustrated. They may accuse you of being cold. They may say you've changed. Perhaps you have. Perhaps you have finally learned that peace does not require everyone to agree with you. There is something interesting that happens when you become calmer. Patterns become easier to see. When you are emotionally involved in every conflict, everything feels complicated. You wonder, maybe I really am wrong. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should apologize. Maybe I should explain again. But when you step back emotionally, you begin noticing repetition. The same person becomes angry every time you establish a boundary. The same person becomes distant whenever you disagree. The same person suddenly becomes affectionate when they need something. The same person criticizes you, then praises you, then criticizes you again. The same conflict keeps appearing in different forms. Once you see the pattern, individual incidents stop confusing you. You stop asking, why are they behaving this way today? And start asking, why does this keep happening? That question changes everything. Because manipulation survives through confusion, clarity weakens it. There will always be someone willing to argue longer than you, someone willing to insult more deeply, someone willing to spread rumors, someone determined to have the final word. If your peace depends on defeating every person who challenges you, you will never have peace. Marcus Aurelius lived among political enemies, ambitious officials, critics, and people whose behavior he could not control. Imagine if he had spent his life responding to every insult, every rumor, every disrespectful remark. He would have surrendered his mind to people who did not deserve it. The Stoic question is not, "Can I win this argument?" It is this argument worthy of my energy? Sometimes the answer is yes. Speak, correct the lie, defend what matters, but sometimes the answer is no, and walking away becomes an act of intelligence. Not every accusation requires defense, not every insult requires retaliation, not every misunderstanding requires explanation. Not every invitation to conflict deserves acceptance. You have limited time, limited attention, limited emotional energy. Spend them carefully. There is something you should understand. When you stop reacting the way someone expects, they may not immediately stop. Sometimes they intensify. If guilt once controlled you, and suddenly it doesn't, they may increase the guilt. If anger once frightened you, and suddenly you remain calm, they may become louder. If silence once made you chase them, and suddenly you don't, they may withdraw longer. Why? Because the old strategy is no longer producing the old result. And this is where many people surrender. They think, maybe staying calm isn't working. But sometimes the increased pressure is evidence that the old dynamic is being challenged. Remain observant. Do not turn calmness into another performance. You do not need to prove how unbothered you are. You simply need to remain responsible for your actions. If a conversation becomes abusive or unsafe, leave. If someone repeatedly violates your boundaries, reduce their access to you. Calmness does not require endless tolerance. Sometimes calmness means quietly closing the door. There is another form of manipulation that often goes unnoticed, the manipulation of attention. Someone says something provocative. You spend the next 3 hours thinking about it. Someone ignores you. You check your phone repeatedly. Someone criticizes you. You replay the conversation all night. Someone posts something that seems directed at you. Now your entire evening belongs to them. They may not even be physically present, yet they occupy your mind. This is why inner discipline matters. Your attention is part of your life. Whatever repeatedly receives your attention receives pieces of your existence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly to return his mind to what was in front of him: your work, your duties, your character, the present moment. So when someone provokes you, ask, "Does this deserve another hour of my life?" Often the answer will be no. Then return. Return to your work. Return to your family. Return to your goals. Return to the life happening in front of you. Do not allow someone's 5-second comment to occupy 5 hours of your mind. That is too expensive. We usually associate manipulation with negativity, criticism, threats, anger, guilt, but praise can also become a form of control. Someone flatters you. "You're the only person I can trust." Then comes the request. "You're such a generous person." Then comes the expectation. "You're different from everyone else." Then comes the pressure to prove that you really are different. Praise feels pleasant, and because it feels pleasant, we rarely question it. But the Stoic must remain steady in both criticism and praise. If insults control you, you are not free. But if compliments control you, you are not free either. The goal is not to reject appreciation. Accept sincere praise graciously, but do not become dependent upon it. Because once someone discovers that praise opens every door, they may begin using it as a key. Know who you are before someone compliments you. Then their praise becomes pleasant rather than necessary. Many people know when they are being manipulated. They feel it. They notice the guilt. They notice the disrespect. They notice the pressure, yet they still surrender. Why? Because standing firm may mean someone dislikes them, and for some people, being disliked feels unbearable, so they say yes when they want to say no. They laugh at jokes that disrespect them. They tolerate behavior they privately resent. They remain silent when they should speak, all because they want to remain liked. But eventually you must choose. Would you rather disappoint another person for a moment or disappoint yourself repeatedly? There will be moments when protecting your peace makes you unpopular. There will be people who preferred the version of you who had no boundaries. There will be people who call your growth selfish because your old weakness was convenient for them. Let them think what they think. You were not born to become whatever makes everyone else comfortable. Your responsibility is to live with integrity. Real strength often looks surprisingly ordinary. It looks like reading an insulting message and waiting before responding. It looks like hearing criticism without immediately defending yourself. It looks like saying, "I understand," without adding 20 sentences of explanation. It looks like someone trying to provoke jealousy and you refusing to participate. It looks like someone threatening to leave and you refusing to beg. It looks like someone spreading a false story and you deciding that your life will speak louder than your argument. It looks like walking into a room where you know people have talked about you and behaving with dignity anyway. No performance, no revenge, no desperate attempt to prove something, just composure. This is why calm people can sometimes make controlling people uncomfortable. There is nothing obvious to grab, no explosive anger, no desperate need for approval, no predictable fear, no endless explanation. Just a person standing firmly within themselves. When you feel someone pulling you emotionally, create a habit. Before responding, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Name it. Anger, fear, guilt, embarrassment, jealousy. The need to prove yourself. Then ask, what reaction are they hoping to get from me? Do they want you defensive? Do they want you frightened? Do they want you to chase? Do they want you to surrender your boundary? And finally, what would I choose if I were completely calm? That third question is powerful because it separates your values from the emotional pressure of the moment. You may still decide to speak, you may still confront them, you may still apologize, you may still leave, but now the decision belongs to you. And that is the point. There will always be pressure. People will want answers, they will want decisions, they will want reactions. But you are allowed to think, you are allowed to pause, you are allowed to say, I need time. You are allowed to change your mind, you are allowed to refuse, you are allowed to leave conversations that become disrespectful, you are allowed to protect your attention. The world may reward quick reactions. Stoicism teaches deliberate action. The difference may seem small, but it can change your entire life. Because many of the decisions we regret were not made from wisdom, they were made from emotional urgency. We were angry, afraid, lonely, desperate, embarrassed, and we wanted relief immediately. The calm mind is willing to endure temporary discomfort to avoid permanent regret. Remember that. Temporary discomfort is often the price of maintaining your freedom. Let someone be disappointed. Let the silence exist. Let the accusation remain unanswered for a moment. Let yourself think. You do not owe the world an immediate emotional response. The goal is not to become impossible to hurt. You are human. Certain words will hurt. Certain betrayals will wound you. Certain losses will shake you. Stoicism never required you to become stone. It asks for something more realistic. When the emotion arrives, do not immediately hand it the steering wheel. Feel anger without becoming anger. Feel fear without becoming obedient to fear. Feel rejection without abandoning your dignity. Feel sadness without believing your life is ruined. Feel pressure without surrendering your judgment. That is self-mastery. And self-mastery does not happen once. It is practiced in small moments. One pause, one boundary, one unanswered provocation, one decision not to chase. One moment when you could have reacted but chose to think instead. Slowly, these moments become character. And one day you realize something. The people who once disturbed your peace so easily no longer have the same effect. Their words haven't necessarily changed. You have. You have learnt that you do not control what others attempt. You control what you participate in. You do not control whether someone criticizes you. You control whether their criticism becomes your identity. You do not control whether someone tries to provoke you. You control whether you accept the invitation. You do not control whether someone tries to manipulate you, but you can become increasingly difficult to manipulate, not through suspicion, not through aggression, not through becoming cold, but through awareness, through boundaries, through self-respect, and above all, through calmness. So when someone tries to disturb you, remember, pause before you react, observe before you believe, think before you answer, and never allow another person's chaos to decide who you become. Keep possession of your mind. Keep possession of your choices. Keep possession of your peace. Because the calmer you become, the more clearly you can see. And the more clearly you can see, the harder you are to control.